Hello everyone, long time no see. So I've been wishing to make this video for a very long time. However, due to my work, my health, things happening with my family, etc., I've not been able to do so. Fortunately today, I've got the chance to do this presentation. So as you can see from the title, this will be a refutation against a rumor or a claim that I've seen on YouTube as well as on some other websites like Quora or Reddit over the past few years. So the claim is that Japonic or Japanese people originated from South China or Southeast Asia. And I'm not sure why this claim has spread this far and wide, because based on my researches, this claim is entirely baseless and unfounded. So today I'll be trying my best to refute certain YouTubers, so listed here, I won't read their names. So these YouTubers who have expressed their support to such baseless rumors or claims. So things to precise before I start. Nope, I'm not a Chinese or Han nationalist. My view is different from China and from most Chinese. So China actually wants to claim Japanese and Koreans as originated from China. So if you've been following the news, if you are so you will certainly know that like a few years before there was like a conflict with the origin of kimchi, the origin of hanbok, and also katana. So I won't go into details. So if you are interested in those like kind of conflicts, you can search for yourself on the internet. Okay, so please do not inflame the comment section or call me names. I do not represent China or Japan. I only represent myself. And I have nothing personal against the YouTubers that I named. I'm only questioning their belief in the South China origin of Japonic, which is baseless. So I don't want to start a polemic. I do this in the name of science and being objective in the study of history. And also, anthropology and archaeology have always been my hobby, so I'm doing this for that as well. And I don't depend on YouTube for a living, at least not for now. So I never make outrageous or extravagant claims to catch people's attention, unlike some other YouTubers. So the information I'm going to present in this presentation are all facts supported by empirical evidence. So I will divide my presentation into two parts, so otherwise it's going to be too long. The first part, or this part, will focus mostly on evidence from archaeology, whereas the second part will focus on genetics, anthropology, and linguistics. So stay tuned for the second part. And English isn't my native language, so I apologize in advance for any grammar or word mistakes I'll likely make in the presentation. So without further ado, let's begin. So first, let's learn some geography. So what I consider to be North China, so largely the Yellow River region, including Gansu, Ningxia, Shanxi, Shanxi, Hebei, Henan, Shandong, etc. And what I consider to be Central China, so largely the Yangtze River region, including Sichuan, Chongqing, Hubei, and Hunan, Jiangxi, Anhui, Jiangsu, Shanghai, and Zhejiang. And what I consider to be South China, so largely the Pearl River or West River and the surrounding regions, including Guangdong, Guangxi, Fujian, Hainan, Guizhou, and Yunnan. So if you are not familiar with the names of Chinese provinces, I suggest you to do a quick search on the internet. Otherwise you won't be able to like follow my presentation. Okay, so it's important to remember these provinces and their assigned regions, North, Central, and South. as it will make it easier to understand what I'm going to talk about. So this map here. So Neolithic China can be divided into three broad cultural regions. So according to Dr. Zhao Zhijun, so he's a leading Chinese botanical archaeologist who obtained his master and doctor degrees in the University of Missouri, Columbia, and he also works for the Smithsonian Institution. So yes, Neolithic China can be roughly divided into three general areas with different cultures. So Neolithic North China, largely the Yellow River region, but also parts of Inner Mongolia and Liaoning, is characterized by millet farming, as you can see in this picture. Neolithic Central China, so largely the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River, characterized by rice farming. And Neolithic South China, Pearl River and the surrounding regions, characterized largely by hunter-gathering, though also with some tuber and taro farming, similar to the Huabinian culture of Southeast Asia. So yes, in the yellow you can see that this is the millet farming region, and in turquoise you can see that it's the rice farming regions, and the regions that are in purple, which encompasses large swaths of southwest and south China. So those are like hunter-gathering regions. Okay, so answer me. If people from Neolithic South China, Pearl River and surrounding regions, and Southeast Asia didn't even cultivate rice, so how could they be the ancestors of Yayoi? So yes, so this is a question to ask those people who think that the Japonic originated from South China. So just think about that question. So rice farming started off in central China, middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze, and then spread to both directions. And according to current evidence, it likely spread to North China earlier than to South China and Southeast Asia. So again, according to Dr. Zhao Zhijun, evidence of rice cultivation has been found in Jiahu and Baligang cultures. Both date to around 8,000 years ago, and both were from Neolithic Henan. So if you go, Henan province is in North China, yes. And according to Dr. Gary W. Crawford, so he's a Canadian archaeologist, Dr. Chen Xuexiang and Dr. Wang Jianhua, evidence of rice cultivation has also been found in the Houli culture of Neolithic Shandong, dating back to around 7,000 to 6,000 years ago. And according to Dr. Cui Yong, so he's a leading archaeologist who excavated the Neolithic Guye site in Guangdong, dating back to 5,000 years ago. At that time, people in the Pearl River Delta still primarily relied on olives and the various types of nuts, such as Nepali hog plums, as their staple food. So they haven't been quite caught up with the rice farming in central China just yet, at 5,000 years ago. So transition to rice and millet farming didn't occur on a large scale in South and Southwest China and Southeast Asia until around 4,000 years ago, likely related to a global cooling around that time, which pushed the Yangtze farmers southward, replacing the earlier Huabinian Longlin and other hunter-gatherers in the region. So yes, we'll talk about more about Huabinian and Longlin in part 2. So in the anthropological part. So in this part, we'll mostly focus on archaeology. So in terms of their diet and lifestyle, the Guye people of ancient Guangdong were most similar to the Native American tribes of California and Baja California, who are also hunter-gatherers, living in a similar latitude. So rice farming in Korea and Japan also occurred around 4,000 to 3,000 years ago, from what I know, linked to the Mumun and Yayoi cultures. So supporters of the South China origin hypothesis of Japonic, please answer me again. So what are the chances for a group of people in South China or Southeast Asia uh, who has just recently transitioned to farming, crossing thousands of kilometers of land and sea, to bring advanced rice farming to Korea and Japan? Shouldn't it be more logical to say that farming in Korea and Japan was likely influenced by the well-established cultures much closer in North China, such as those from Neolithic Shandong and Henan? So yes, another question to think about for those stubborn supporters of the South China origin hypothesis of Japonic. So burial styles right now. So according to Dr. Xiaoming Zhang et al., 2020, hanging coffins were a very common type of burial style in late Neolithic and Bronze Age South China. It started off around 4,000 years ago in Neolithic Fujian, and gradually spread westwards to Guangdong, Guangxi, Sichuan, Guizhou, and Yunnan. And similar burial styles have also been found in Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia. And yet, as far as I know, hanging coffins have never been found in Korea or Japan, and neither in the surrounding regions of North and Northeast China. So what I mean by hanging coffins, so these are the hanging coffins. I believe this photo was taken in a archaeological site somewhere in Yunnan province, so in the far southwest of China. So you can see this basically, they put some wooden poles on the cliff, and they put the coffins in between the poles. So these are what I mean by hanging coffin. So contrary to the hanging coffins of South China and Southeast Asia, from the best of my knowledge, late Neolithic and early Bronze Age Korea had dolmen burials, so such as those from the archaeological sites of Gochang and Hwasun. So dolmens were quite common in northern Eurasia at that time as well. According to another paper by A.L. Nesterkina, 2017, dolmens were also found in Yayoi period Japan, primarily centered in northwestern Kyushu, so around the areas of Fukuoka, Nagasaki, and Saga. So in China, dolmens are mostly concentrated in Liaoning and Shandong in North China, with the southernmost distribution in Zhejiang in central China, and they have not been found further south. So the one found in Zhejiang was an isolated instance, and probably represents population movement from the north to the south, rather than the other way around. And the vast majority of dolmens in China are found in Liaoning and Shandong. So by dolmen, I mean this type of burial. And here's a distribution of the dolmens in Northeast Asia. You can see it's primarily centered in Korea, but also in some parts of Manchuria, and also in Shandong Peninsula, and also in parts of northwestern Kyushu. Okay, so and the later earthen or stone mound or tumuli burials, common in Iron Age North China, Korea, and Japan, were likely influenced by cultures on the Eurasian steppe. For instance, the Kurgan mounds of the Skichens. So South China was yet again largely exempt from such traditions or influences. The earthen mounds there were built by the southward migrating Semitic people, whereas the natives largely continued to do what they were doing before. So here's the earthen tumulus tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. So this tomb this tomb is located in the Shanxi province of northwest China. So this is the tomb itself, and the background is the Lishan mountain. And this one is the world famous Daisen Kofen tumulus in Sakai city of Osaka Prefecture, Japan. And this one is the Goguryeo stone tumulus from the city of Jian in Jilin province in northeast China. So again, according to Dr. Li Fajun, the leading Chinese anthropologist who obtained his PhD at Jilin University and is currently teaching at Zhongshan University of Guangdong. Neolithic South China, so Guangxi in particular, also had a rather special type of burial called dismemberment burial. And other than South China, the only other culture so as far as I'm aware, the only other culture which had such type of burial was the Lapita culture of Neolithic Vanuatu, linked to the Melanesians or Austronesians. So again, to the best of my knowledge, this type of burial has never been found in North China, Korea, and Japan. So here's an example. So the dismemberment burial from the Dingsishan archaeological site of Neolithic Guangxi, just outside the city of Nanning. So you can see the skeleton has been carefully dismembered and put in a squarish position. So right now we're talking about the tools and weapons. So North China, Korea, and Japan, South China and Southeast Asia already had different tools and industries even back in the Paleolithic. South China and Southeast Asia back then was dominated by Huabinian or related cultures, characterized by a generally unifacial flake tool tradition, made primarily on water-rounded pebbles and large flakes detached from those pebbles, according to Gorman 1970. So their tools were usually of large sizes, belonging to the hand axe or chopper type. So here's an example. So Huabinian stone tools found at the Xiaodong Rock Shelter in Linshan County in Yunnan Province, so very close to the border with Myanmar. And these are dating back to 43,500 years ago. So as you can see, these are mostly of the hand axe and chopper type. So on the contrary, according to Dr. Y. Chen et al., 2022, and C. Zhao et al., 2023, the Upper Paleolithic of North China was dominated by microliths and microblade, characterized by the systematic production of tiny and laterally parallel lamellar pieces from specifically pre-shaped cores using the pressure napping method, so completely different from the Huabinian choppers. And again, according to C. Zhao et al. 2023, North China and Northeast Asia, so including Northeast China, the Korean Peninsula, the Russian Far East, and Hokkaido, saw the emergence of the earliest microblade technology at the onset of the last glacial maximum, so roughly 20,000 years ago. So more specifically regarding Upper Paleolithic Japan, Dr. C. Chun, 1989, stated that microblade remains are well spread over almost all the Japanese archipelago, and that the microblade industries from North China, Japan, Northeast Asia, and northwestern North America derived from a common cultural heritage called Juktai. So Juktai is the name given by a Russian archaeologist to this type of Northeast Asian microblade assemblage, and the name given by Chinese archaeologists to the same assemblage is called Hutouliang. So this can already debunk the Commander Radix claim in one of his videos that Upper Paleolithic Japan belonged to the Hoabinhian cultural heritage, and that the Jomon were of Hoabinhian descent. So this is completely false, completely baseless. So as you can see here, this is the Paleolithic Jomon Shirataki obsidian microplates. I believe they were found in the Tohoku region, the northeast part of Japan. Like if I'm correct, maybe around the area of Fukushima, like the area of the nuclear power plants. So these things they are reminiscent of the weapons that the Aztecs have used, like the famous macuavito. So things didn't change that much in the Neolithic, since both Jomon and Hoabinhian industries lasted well into the Neolithic era in their respective regions. What was new during the Neolithic of South China, however, was the development of a type of large and flat stone shovel or spade, with unclear usages. Some claim that it served ritual purposes. Others claim that it was probably used for agriculture, so something like a plough. So to the best of my knowledge, this type of stone shovel was most commonly found in Guangxi, Guangdong, also scattered across Fujian, Guizhou, Taiwan, Hainan, and parts of Southeast Asia. So hasn't been found in Japan or Korea, and also rare in North China. So to give you some examples of the stone shovels. So this one, the left one and the middle one were found in Guangxi province, and this one was found in Guizhou province. So these two, I believe, were from the early Neolithic of Guangxi, and this one was from the late Neolithic or perhaps the early Bronze Age of Guizhou province. Okay, so in the Bronze Age, differences between the North and the South became more significant. The north of China witnessed the appearance of chariots, likely influenced by the Eurasian steppe. New types of weapons, such as the dagger axes, the bronze spears, and the bronze swords, had also appeared. And although Korea and Japan were largely exempt from the rise of chariots due to unsuitable terrains, they were nonetheless under the influence of North China in terms of tools and weapons. So in particular, a type of bronze sword called Liaoning-style bronze sword, or lute-shaped curved-edge bronze sword, had spread across northeast China, Russian Far East, Korea, and Japan. So as far as I know, such type of sword was absent from South China and Southeast Asia. So we'll show you three examples on the next slide. Left one was from Korea, middle one from Liaoning, China, and the right one from the Yoshinogari Yayoi side of Japan. So the left one, this one was from Bronze Age Korea, and the middle one from Bronze Age Liaoning province in northeast China, and the right one is from the Yoshinogari side, a Yayoi period site in Japan. So dagger axes likely originated from the Yellow River region among the early Sinitic people, and later spread to Korea and Japan. Back in the Shang and Western Zhou periods, they were mostly infantry weapons of short length and were intended to be used together with a shield. Longer chariot versions only appeared in the spring and autumn period or later. So people in Korea and Japan used the dagger axe as an infantry weapon, similar to how the early Sinitic people used it during the Shang and Western Zhou. So we'll show you two examples on the next slide. On the left side is a Shang-era warrior buried alive with dagger axe and shield. And on the right side is a reconstruction of a Yayoi-era warrior with dagger axe and shield by the Tokyo National Museum. So the one from the left side is the Shang warrior, buried alive with dagger, axe, and shield. And the red one is the Yayoi era warrior reconstructed by Tokyo National Museum. So as you can see, they have similar weapons with similar postures. The only difference is that the Shang shield seems to be a bit larger than the one used by the Yayoi warrior. So this particular Shang warrior burial was discovered at the Yanxu archaeological site in Henan province in North China. Okay, so there's some connection between Bronze Age Henan, Bronze Age Shandong, and Bronze Age Japan. So contrary to popular belief, it's not a connection with the Yangtze River or South China or Southeast Asia, but rather with like North China. So other cherished Yayoi Kofun area objects, such as bronze bells and bronze mirrors, also bear similarities to the bronze objects found in north-central China and Korea at around roughly the same time. So by the Warring States period, central China had already been largely Sinicized. So we'll show you two examples on the next slide. So the left is a Yayoi era bronze Dotaku bell. So they were mostly used for ritual purposes. And the right one are Sinitic bronze bells called Bianzhong from the Warring States era, so from the Sui or Zheng kingdom in central China. So this one is the Yayoi Dotaku bell, and this one were the Bronze Age Sinitic bells. So they were not exactly similar, but as you can see, they showed some similarities. So iron weapons and armors began to appear in Japan around the late Yayoi and early Kofun era, and unsurprisingly they bear similarities to the ones used in Korea and North China and at contemporaneous eras. So two examples on the next slide. Left one is a Kofun era Tanko armor, and the right one is a Gaia iron armor and helmet from Iron Age South Korea. So this one is the Kofun era Tanko armor, and this one is the Gaia armor. And if I remember correctly, so the Gaia was known as Mimana in Japanese records. So yes, there's a connection between Japan and South Korea at that time, specifically between Gaia and Japan. So, and speaking of weapons and warfare, all three, North Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese, had a special preference or reverence for bow and arrows. Among the ancient Sinitic people, 射礼 or archery was considered to be one of the 6 skills or abilities that a nobleman or gentleman must have. And in Japan they have the kyudo and the yabusame, which have been passed on for more than 1,000 years. However, the same sentiment was not shared by the southern peoples as they had other ranged weapons, as we'll see later. So the left one is a reconstruction of the ancient Sinitic 射礼 or archery, and the middle one is Japanese gyudo, and the right one is traditional Korean archery. So as we can see, they all valued archery very highly, and their postures all have some similarities. So, and in particular, Japan had a strong horse archery tradition. Their Yabusame rituals have been passed on for at least 1,500 years. And historically speaking, the samurai were primarily horse archers and not swordsmen, contrary to popular beliefs. So the primary weapons of the samurai were bow and arrows, and they were also armed with polearms, like the yari spear and the naginata glaive, and they were also trained with grappling and wrestling techniques as well. So it was mentioned in a record about the Imjin War that a Japanese samurai resorted to wrestling when he found out that none of his weapons could effectively penetrate Ming armor. So this case proved that they were trained with a variety of weapons and martial arts styles, and were definitely not a bunch of brutes who try to cut down everything with katana sword, as often depicted in popular culture. So that's definitely not the case. So right now we'll be moving on to the Bronze Age of South China and Southeast Asia. So the Bronze Age in South China and Southeast Asia started around 3,000 years ago, with well-known cultures such as Dong Song in North Vietnam, so around 1000 BC to 1st century AD, and Ban Chiang, which is in Thailand, around 2000 BC to 200 AD, with bronze making around 1000 BC. So South China and a portion of Southwest China were also under their influence, and fell outside of the Sinosphere. So weapons and objects were mostly distinct from the ones found in North China, Korea, and Japan. So, contrary to the North, swords and polearms were relatively rare in South and Southwest China. Instead, different types of bronze daggers prevailed. So they could probably be used in riverine warfare, could possibly be thrown as well if needed, similar to throwing knives, and they were likely used in a similar way as tomahawks or franciscas, so thrown at the enemy shortly before melee. So this is how I imagine how they would be used. So it's likely that a Baiyue or Aolak warrior would carry several of these bronze daggers to battle, and would likely smear some of them with poison. So they would throw them at the enemy just before melee combat. So they would be retrieved, most likely retrieved after battle, since bronze was relatively expensive at that time. So they should be quite effective in an ambush against unarmored opponents. And their general war tactics were probably quite close to what moderns would call guerrilla warfare, preferring ambushes or night raids over face-to-face battle. So these are the throwing knives that I'm talking about. So this one I believe is from Bronze Age Guangdong. This one is from Guangxi, and this one is also from Guangxi. And so as you can see, they were made to be thrown. Their shape and size were best suited to be thrown. Of course, they could also be used for thrusting, but I think their primary purpose was throwing knife. So if you compare them with the Liaoning style bronze swords that we talked about earlier on slide 34, we can see that they are completely different in shape and size, and I don't think the Liaoning type sword was meant to be thrown. So of course you could throw it as a last resort. However, it was primarily a thrusting weapon, so it's different from the small daggers found in the south. And their axes were also different from the dagger axes commonly used in the north. They had a particular type of axe called the boot-shaped axe. Some Chinese historians argue that the boot-shaped axe was nothing more than an imitation of the dagger axe. However, I think it looked different enough from the dagger axe. Other types of axes existed as well. So stone axes and shovels from the Neolithic continue to be used, and a type of round-edged bronze axe was used in southwest China, particularly among the Ba, Shu, and Dian peoples. So the left one is a boot-shaped bronze axe found in Vietnam and is associated with the Dong Song culture. So axes similar in shapes and have been found in Guangxi and Hunan in South China. So the middle one is a round-edged bashu style bronze axe found in Bronze Age Sichuan. And the right one are a pair of boot-shaped axes found in Guangdong. So some might think that the ones from Guangdong on the right look a lot like the dagger axes, but in my opinion they are still different. So if you compare them to the Shang and Yayoi dagger axes that we talked about earlier, we can see that the Guangdong boot-shaped axes are shorter and rounder in shape, and they have an obvious downward pointing beak, so downward pointing beak. Unlike the northern dagger axes that have a straight blade, or even sometimes a slightly curved upward blade. So it's not downward like the boot-shaped axe. So the Vietnam example here also have a downward beak. So javelin was another weapon that saw very limited use in the north, but was quite commonly used by various peoples in South China and Southeast Asia. So here's the caveat. I'm aware that a few Han-era iron javelins have been found in North China, but they are much rarer compared to the number of swords and halberds found, indicating that they were not common battlefield weapons for Han armies, but were likely imported and were only used for self-defense or maybe by the elite units. So, according to the archaeological records, the earliest javelins in China were unearthed at the Neolithic Hemudu archaeological site in Zhejiang province in central China. They were made out of wood and bone, so I couldn't find a picture of it. And according to ancient Semitic records, javelin and shield were the preferred weapons of Bandun people, who existed around the 2nd century BC in southwest China, and also the Liao or Creole people, who existed between the 4th to the 12th century AD, also in south and southwest China, and the Nongzhigao's rebels from the 11th century AD. So they were the ancestors of modern Zhuang and Tainon peoples. So all of them were from south or southwest China. And the depictions in Angkor Wat in Cambodia showed that the javelin and shield were the preferred weapons of the Khmer and Cham armies as well. So these are the depictions of Champa infantrymen in Angkor Wat, and we can see that javelin and shield were their main weapons. You can see that they stand in line, stand in formation, and they took turns throwing their javelins. And the most impactful weapon invented in South China and Southeast Asia was no other than the crossbow. Ancient Semitic records were quite murky about the origin of crossbow. According to a book named Wu Yue Chunqiu written during the Eastern Han, so 25 to 220 AD, the crossbow was invented by a man named Qin of the Chu Kingdom during the Warring States era. And the Vietnamese legend suggests that around the 3rd century BC, a king named An Duan Vuong of the Aula Kingdom commissioned a man named Cao Lo to build a magic crossbow. So according to linguistic analysis of the word crossbow in various East and Southeast Asian languages, the word itself likely had an Austroasiatic origin, meaning that the weapon was likely invented by the Austroasiatic peoples of South China or Southeast Asia, and was later adopted by the Chu Kingdom in central China before spreading to the central plains of North China. So given that isolated Austroasiatic tribes on the Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal have crossbows, this invention is likely very ancient, potentially dating back to a few thousand years ago. So here's a list of the word crossbow in various East and Southeast Asian languages. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of some of these words, so please bear with me. So in Khmer, it's pronounced as sna, and in Brau, which is an Austroasiatic language spoken in Cambodia, it's pronounced as something like Chrao or Krao. And in Jarai, which is an Austronesian language spoken in Vietnam and in Cambodia, it's pronounced as Hrao. And in the Hmong language of South China and Southeast Asia, it's pronounced as Hening, something like that. And in the Zhuang language, which is a Tai-Kadai language in South China, it's pronounced as Da. And in Old Chinese, the word crossbow is pronounced something like Kna or Sna, so very similar to the Khmer word Sna. So it's likely a loan word from Austroasiatic, which eventually evolved into Middle Chinese Nu and Mandarin Nu. So here's the linguistic evidence for the Austroasiatic origin of crossbow. So here are some actual evidence. So in the left, we see that there's a Jalai man from the Ratanakili province of Cambodia making a wooden crossbow. And on the right one, we see some old Nicobarese objects, so including two crossbows that the Nicobarese tribesmen used them to hunt birds. However, the above-mentioned word for crossbow is curiously missing from Korean and Japanese. They have no native word to designate crossbow, at least according to my researches. The Korean word for crossbow is no, which is obviously a loanword from Middle Chinese, and only appears in obsolete compounds like the expression sunogong, which was the name for a type of repeating crossbow used in the early Joseon era. And the Japanese word for crossbow is kurosubo. As you can see, this is the kurosubo, katakana, which is a loanword from English. In my researches, I also found that certain sources cite the word ishiyumi, so hiragana ishiyumi, or stone bow, as the Japanese name for crossbow. So ishi means stone, and yumi means bow. So this is a compound word. So it's a compound word and was likely coined later and was not part of the original Japanese vocabulary, because compound words are usually invented later to designate new objects or new terms. Again, I'm going to ask this question. So ask this question to the supporters of the South China origin of Japonic. So if Japonic people really originated from South China or lived there for a very long time before moving to Japan, then they should have a native word for crossbow, or should have borrowed the word crossbow from the plethora of languages in that region, which all have a native word for crossbow, instead of borrowing it from English or creating a completely new compound word. So this is also an evidence against the South China origin of Japonic. And they should have used it extensively. Island environment isn't a constraint, as we see that the Nicobarese people use it to hunt birds. However, the truth is crossbow played a very minor or almost non-existent role in Japanese history. Even they knew such a weapon existed due to their interactions with Tang China. They still firmly stick to their Yumi longbows and horse archery. Not only the weapons between the north and south were different, but the ceremonial equipment was also different. While the Yayoi and ancient Sinitic people preferred bronze bells, the ancient people of South China and Southeast Asia preferred bronze drums. These drums could be made quite large, sometimes with a diameter of over 2 meters or even larger. The use of bronze drums is thought to have started with the Dongson culture of North Vietnam, and then spread to South China and other parts of Southeast Asia. And as far as I know, they haven't been discovered in North China, Korea, or Japan. So here are two examples. Left one is the bronze drum from Guangxi, and the right one is the bronze drum from Yunnan. So as you can see, they could be made quite large, and they were used in ceremonial events. So some final thoughts. So my presentation challenges the traditional Sinocentric historiography in East Asia. We need to acknowledge that there were multiple distinct civilizations in China, and there's a need to deconstruct the so-called Sinosphere into several parts, in which Japan and Korea are only similar to the northern or northeastern part. And I will talk about genetic, anthropological, and linguistic evidence against the Japonic origin in South China in my next video. So stay tuned for that. And I'm setting myself a goal. If this video has more than 200 views, it's a very realistic goal. So if this video has more than 200 views, I'll make another one about the genetic, anthropological, and the linguistic evidence. So like I mentioned, there's a need to push for an objective scientific view of the past, away from other interferences, such as nationalism and politics. So tolerance for differences is the key to solve many of the ongoing conflicts in East and Southeast Asia and around the world. And last but not least, I want to mention that I have absolutely nothing against Japanese and Koreans. I think they have some qualities which Chinese people mostly lack. And by qualities, I mean their cleanliness, their care for appearance, their attention to details, and their working ethics. So just to name a few of those qualities. And the uniqueness of their cultures need to be recognized and respected. So thanks for watching, and here are a list of words uh, a list of words for thank you in various languages that I know. So in Japanese, this would be arigato gozaimasu. So I hope my pronunciation is correct. I'm going to butcher some of these pronunciations. So in Japanese is arigato gozaimasu. In Zhuang language, which is a Tai-Kadai language spoken in South China, is pronounced, the word for thank you is gyobai, gyobai. I've also heard some individuals pronounce it as zoubai. So either gyobai or zoubai, both are correct. And in Boye language, which is another Tai-Kadai language spoken in South China, the word for thank you is Bai, so very similar to Zhuang. And in the Hmong languages, so there are three major branches of Hmong. So the eastern and central branches are mostly spoken in South China, whereas the western branch is found in Yunnan as well as in Laos and Thailand. So the word for thank you in Eastern Hmong is jiko, jiko, and the word for thank you in Central Hmong is bofut, bofut, and the word for thank you in Western Hmong is wajo, wajo, and the word for thank you in Tai Lu language spoken in southwest China is either in Di or in Li. I've heard both pronunciations, and I'm not exactly sure which one is the correct one. So if any of you guys speak Tai Lu, please let me know. And yes, thanks for watching and happy holidays. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and see you next time. Thank you very much.